Jesse, thanks for joining us today to talk about Levitate. Could you go ahead and tell everybody, about you and your story, how Levitate got started?
Yeah, so they're kind of related. So I'll back up a little bit, tell you about my story. So prior to Levitate, I was the founder and CEO of ShareFile, which is a business file sharing solution. You may be familiar with it.
Yep.
It was acquired by Citrix back in 2011. I stayed at Citrix for 5 years, and we grew ShareFile pretty large. When I left, that we had about 70,000 business customers, and we had kind of a concentration on the professional services industry. So actually, accounting was our number one industry. I used to say in the early days, now a lot of people use ShareFile, but in the early days, if somebody ever had heard of it, it was always that their accountant used it. So we had one out of every three accounting firms using ShareFile, but also a lot of law firms, financial advisors, generally kind of security conscious professional services companies. So got a lot of experience working with professional services firms. And one of the things I noticed just interacting with lots of small relationship-based businesses like law firms was that they tended to grow through relationships and word of mouth and just doing a good job kind of keeping in touch and staying top of mind with people in their network more than anything. And but all the marketing tools out there were really geared more toward transactional businesses, enterprise businesses. They're all focused on kind of automation and mass blasting emails and all that kind of thing. And so what I really set out to do, I decided to leave Citrix and start this business Levitate, was to really try to help these relationship-based businesses that grow by keeping in touch more authentically to do a better job staying top of mind in that personal and authentic way, but then figuring out how to scale it. Because everybody knows, I think most people kind of intuitively know that if you kind of send a blast message out through MailChimp or Constant Contact, that's not nearly as good as if I open up Outlook and send you a personal
Right.
But then the difficult thing is, well, how do I scale that and make it so that I can actually follow through and keep in touch in that way? So that's the story of Levitate. I decided to try to build that solution, and it's been a really good journey. There's a technology piece to it. There's content piece to it. There's a lot that we've kind of figured out how to solve that problem for law firms and other professional services firms.
Cool. So one of the things you mentioned was the concept of how people are still getting work, and it's been interesting from over the past year when people were remote, when law firms were realizing, oh, we're losing our ability to go network, to go to the chamber event, to go meet people for coffee. There was a big, I think the initial thought was, well, we're going to have to turn all to paid Google or social. But the vast majority of the law firms, at least that we work with and other lawyers I talk to, they're seeing that even after 12 months of remote work, the personal referrals and those relationships are still feeding their businesses. And it hasn't changed as much. Like maybe if you were like that before, more, digital marketing driven, that was the case. But I think most people have found that there hasn't been that big of an adjustment. You may be working different, and you may be doing Zoom happy hours and things that were super popular a year ago, which is funny to say. But people are still finding that same kind of relationship-based way of growing their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the other interesting thing for me is I've been on being a successful entrepreneur previously. I've been on the receiving end of a lot of people trying to sell me professional service. A lot of law firms would like to work with us, and financial advisors and all that kind of thing. And one of the things that just really strikes me, so I can kind of be in the position of the prospect of like, well, what works for somebody like me? And one of the amazing things is the difference between if you just meet somebody, if I met somebody at a networking event, had one kind of conversation with them, I'm so much more likely to respond to them if they send me an email than a cold email or something like that, or a referral. Of course, I would definitely trust that. And but I think where a lot of people fall off, and it's just because as professional services, and I ran a professional services company at one point as well. you don't have a dedicated sales team. You're busy doing client work too, and a bunch of other
Mhm.
things. But oftentimes we go to the networking event. We've got a whole list of people that we wish we were keeping in touch with more often. And then we always run into the experience like, oh, I'm at a conference, I run into you, Chad. And I'm like, oh man, it's been 5 years.
Right.
I wish I was keeping in touch with Chad more. I know it would be good for me to do, but kind of the gap between what I want to do and I intend to do, and then the follow through is a challenge. And
Right.
so for lawyers, you invest in the networking event, but then the huge benefit comes with making sure after the networking event you consistently keep in touch in
Right.
a personal way and keep that relationship warm, because it sometimes can be years before it's the right time. And then somebody asked me for a recommendation, or in my case, I eventually leave Citrix and I start a new company. So now I'm in the market for a new law firm, and it's the person
Right.
that's been keeping in touch and checking in that they're top of mind for me. So it's a really, really interesting topic. And I think uh, there's so much that's written about sales, but 99% of it is about product sales, cold calling and
Right.
advertising, and very little, about, hey, if you're a relationship based business, how do you go about, acquiring
Right.
customers?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's and it's especially when if it's a relationship based business where the that entrepreneur or the owner is not really trained in sales and marketing.
Mm,
Um, I know lawyers who had marketing and sales careers before going into the law, and the sales part from a business perspective is super easy and intuitive to them. But if you are coming out of it, like, you go the track, I was a political science major because I was going to go to law school. If I would look back on it now, of course I would have gone through the business school because there was so much I could have learned ahead of time, and then funneled the legal career through that. But then you have to go backwards on it. So having that training is just not, and it's not intuitive for everyone.
mm, mm.
So let's dive into Levitate as a product and your service offering. So I'm a new, prospect for you. You've been working on this relationship for years. I get maybe this doesn't work with your current business model, but you've been working on it for years. I'm ready to sign up. What should I expect? Like, what would my law firm expect from a
Yeah.
Levitate perspective?
Yeah. So kind of with the high level goal of helping law firms keep in touch in a more personal and authentic way, because that is really what drives a lot of your business. The first piece that became obvious to me that we needed to solve is, if we're gonna help you send a personal, authentic communication, it needs to come from your real email address. And so we kind of, one way that we're different than a traditional email marketing, like a MailChimp or Constant Contact, is Levitate connects to your email and calendar system, so that anything that you send out would be exactly as if you opened up Outlook or your iPhone and sent it. So it really has that
Okay.
kind of feel. So that's one piece. Then the second piece that we try to figure out is, how do we make it really easy so that I could say, hey, like, I want to be in touch with everybody who I've tagged as like a past client or a prospect or referral source. Let's say, for example, I say Chad, I want to make sure I'm staying in touch with Chad like at least every 3 months. Because of that connection, the system can automatically know when the last time was that I emailed you or met with you. Because one thing that we realized for professional services firms is they're not going to go into a CRM system, or very few of them are going to go in and be like managing a pipeline and logging
Right.
activity. It needs to be like really, really intuitive. And so the system builds up those recommendations if you just can kind of bring in a spreadsheet of contacts that are tagged of like past clients or referral sources. We do also have a upcoming integration with Clio to try to make it even easier, so that data can flow from whatever
Got it.
practice management system you're using. But then the next piece of the puzzle that I think ended up, it actually took us probably a year to realize this, is not just a technology problem, keeping in touch.
Right.
Oftentimes, like you mentioned, you're trained as a lawyer, you're not intuitively kind of knowing what is the best way reach out. What do you write when you want to keep in touch with somebody? And so the third piece that we kind of put into place was content. And so we have these marketing coaches, we call them. And so we have a team that is always looking at what's going on in the world, like tax season, looking at some new things, preparing some content, so that as a small law firm, maybe a big law firm, you've got a team of people who can write thought leadership and send it out. Hey, you might have seen this PPP. Here's some things to think about from a legal perspective. But a small law firm, you don't have that. It just takes way too much time to put that kind of stuff together. And
or so it's on like the 8th on your list of to-dos in the next hour that you think are going to happen, and it never does. And exactly. So it's the easiest thing to push down to the bottom of the list.
Exactly. Especially like a lot of people I guess lawyers tend to be pretty good writers as part of their job. But when it comes to that idea of writing thought leadership content, it's a little bit different. And then from a time perspective, hey, if you're billing $100, $200, $300 an hour, you don't want to spend $1,000 or $1,500 worth of your time, writing something up and reinventing the wheel. And so that was the third missing piece for us, which is bringing in content that we can queue up, and then a marketing coach who will just meet with you every few months and say, like, let's put together a little calendar. I've prepared some suggestions for you. You can kind of reject some things, really make it for those who don't have the time or just don't want to spend the time, make it like super easy to kind of queue it up. Like you said earlier, set it and forget it, but yet still accomplish the authentic feel. Because as far as the person who gets the email in your inbox, it's like, Chad really reached out to me to check in or whatever. And so I think bringing all those pieces together has been the formula for success for us, where, we figured out how to help people accomplish that goal of keeping in touch.
Cool. So practically speaking, so if, for example, you just said it feels like Chad just reached out to you, if it's been 3 months or whatever the formula is, is Levitate reaching out to somebody without me having to be involved? Is that, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's two modes. One, we call it tag notifications, and that's basically the idea of, like, everybody I've tagged as a past client, let's say as an example, I want to keep in touch with every 3 months. So every week the system will be flagging, here's that list of people who have not been in touch with. And so then you could kind of come in. Sorry about that. My working from home. That's a good segue into our future topic about COVID and how things are changing in COVID.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah. So you could basically come in once a month, and you've got your list of, these are the 50 people that are in my network that I want to be in touch with that I haven't. And then we have this technology, we call it a group email. So essentially, we can queue up some content. You can still approve it because you may have just been on the phone with somebody yesterday. So give a quick look to the list, X out a couple people. And also, if there's a couple people you want to click in and just add a sentence, I call that black belt Levitate. Not everybody wants to do that, but it's recommended. And then boom, you push the send. And so our philosophy is kind of like the hybrid person plus machine, is what is the right formula. Just the person, too hard to scale. Just the machine, people tune it out. It's fake, it's automated.
Right.
Kind of that mix. That's one mode, is the tag notifications. The other mode is, regardless of whether I talk to you, today, and it hasn't quite been 3 months, we have this content calendar. So with your marketing coach, they'll schedule and say, hey, like, we got a really good tax email, and so let's just send that out to your whole group of past clients, and you can pass it on and say, hey, we put this together, wanted to share it, thought it might be helpful, and then the article. And so in that case, it's a little bit more planned, set it and forget it. The tag notifications are kind of set it and forget it, but it's like, just give it a look and make sure it's the right list that you want to go out to, and then hit approve. Got it.
So you've got the kind of the more traditional, like, just blast type emails.
Yeah.
And then, the you need to be reminded of who you haven't talked to, because you're not going to do anything. And basically removing any possible barrier besides laziness to reach
Right.
out to people, because you're
Yeah.
putting it right in front of them. You've got content, and it's
Right.
just a matter of pushing a button or opting them out at that point,
Yeah.
because things happen. You don't want to talk to people anymore. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Exactly.
so make it
Exactly.
as easy as possible to communicate with people. And this is all email based.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for the most part, so theoretically, you could use Levitate and then see that list of people and say, "Hey, I'm actually going to pick up the phone and call these 10 people if I don't want to
Right.
email." Most of our clients use it for email because it's just so much more efficient to reach out to a larger group. But you could certainly use that list that we kind of curate and be like, I'll call or I'll text or whatever.
Right.
We do have some features on the roadmap actually coming up for text messaging, which is, you got to be careful about it, but to keep it feeling authentic. So reaching out
Right.
to people by text, but where you can potentially do some of those things through text. So our vision overall as a company is just, we want to be that solution, whether it's email, text, sending handwritten cards, sending gifts, anything that you can do to help drive that personal, authentic relationship to grow your word of mouth and referral business. That's where we're going overall as a company.
Got it. No, the texting is interesting, because yeah, I could see the balance on that. Because right now texting is so like, I was just thinking the other day, it'd be great if I know I can do it through Apple's automation, but I haven't looked at it. But you can't set text for a certain time to go by default. Like when I open iMessage, it's not like I can be like, send, I know that, Jesse's Eastern time, I'm 2 hours behind. Let's, wait till the morning. You can't do that like with email, obviously.
Mhm.
But it would be interesting to see once you dive into it, like what it looks like to uh, have that hybrid, besides like, hey, we should grab coffee or a beer sometime level, and the automated blast because you're talking about something in the middle where you say, hey, accountant friend, it's been a while, here's an article I wrote that you might be interested in. That's not normal texting,
Right.
but it could be interesting,
Yeah.
um, because people open text really quick.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, sometimes you see screenshots of things where people have like hundreds and hundreds of unread text messages. I would have like a minor heart attack with that. So I'm a no badge person, but yeah, that could be a really interesting way to start kind of moving texting to that middle ground of communication for businesses.
Yeah. We feel like with texting, we need to be even more careful than email about kind of the authenticity because while people do read text, there's not the same kind of ways to manage them. And so people get
Right.
really mad if they get blasted with, you know, like a spam communication by text. And so it's,
Right.
while people love texting, part of the reason they love texting is because they don't get a lot of blast messages and they communicate with family and friends in that authentic way, which is part of what we're trying to do in email. So there's
Right.
some really good use cases, certainly, reminders for meetings or check-ins or things like that. And then the one-to-one, if you're in the system, being able to, I know it's Chad and I'm sending a little quick message, but I just want a web-based way to go through my client list and do it versus trying to deal with it on my phone. But I
Right.
think when you get into like, hey, let me send you some tax tips, sending that to a blast list and then legally you have to have like press stop to, to stop receiving these messages.
Right.
It kind of destroys the illusion. So we're working our way through the design process on that and just trying to stay true to our goal. But I do think there's some really good opportunity there.
There's something there. It'll be interesting to learn about kind of your testing on it to see what worked and what didn't work.
Mhm.
So if I wanted to sign up for Levitate, what's the onboarding process look like? How long
Yeah,
does it take? What does it involve? Like how much time is it going to involve on my end?
yeah, yeah. So basically, we have you get kind of paired with one of our marketing coaches. So the starting point is simple, like set up a password, connect your email. system into Levitate. We're partners with Microsoft and Google and all the systems. And then there's the data piece. So getting contacts into Levitate. And there's kind of two groups of law firms that we found. One are firms that use a practice management type system like a Clio or a Practice Panther or whatever. We do have this integration with Clio, which is going to make it even easier. But generally what you would do in that case is run a report, create, export a spreadsheet, or maybe even if you don't have a practice management system, you may have a spreadsheet of clients from past matters. So we load that in, and that's the easiest because we can bulk load it. We can have tags and everything already preset. The other mode is, hey, I just don't have anything at all. And so we do have the ability to actually build a list based on your Outlook address book, sent messages, meeting history, or your mobile phone. You can upload the contacts from your mobile phone. And then we actually created a game we call the tagging game to make it more fun to go through those and swipe right, swipe left, tag, kind of organize those. And we actually found that lawyers are, we work with a couple different industries, and I won't call out the names of some of the industries where it's more of a challenge, but that lawyers are pretty good about, if they don't have organized contacts and they just need to spend a little bit of time kind of clearing through and doing it, that they're
Right.
pretty not actually doing that, or they have good support, administrative staff and kind of support that can like help them do that. So then that's the step one kind of first meeting. And then the next meeting is typically the content planning. So that would be like, okay, now we've got everybody. Let's get a safety net of some content scheduled, some check-ins, and come up with a strategy based on your business. Do you have multiple practice areas? Let's see how we can kind of talk to your past clients about some other things you do, and maybe mix in some holidays and other things depending on the style of your firm. And then from there on, it would be a quarterly cadence of, all right, let's throw something on the calendar for a few months from now for 20 minutes or something. I'll come up with, we'll see how that does. Then next time we meet, we'll have more suggestions for you, and you can just come in and be like, okay, I approve or I don't approve. And then in the meantime, when there's topical content, we have a way of sending a link where the marketing coach will say, hey, this cool thing came out. Here's a link to it. If you want to send it, all you have to do is click the link and approve it. If not, then just ignore it and don't worry about it. And so, that's an easy way to just kind of like super lightweight way to communicate between those meetings.
Cool. And so is the marketing coach helping or looking at analytics in that, and then that's what's driving the quarterly suggestions that what's working and what doesn't work?
Yeah, so they can see the analytics on the campaign for the client, as well as they work with lots of clients. And so they can be, oh, I did this for some other client who also does bankruptcy stuff and it was great. So they can apply those best practices and say, hey, maybe we should send this. It's been doing really well.
Cool. Yeah, I like that mix of the tech part, but the human part, because I mean, you experienced this with ShareFile, where, if you're going to have some customers that pay for it every month, but aren't really using it, because they didn't spend the time to learn it. And it's real easy to just have a recurring payment, or you pay annually and all of a sudden you forget about it. And we all have those in our, whatever version of payments, in your Apple feed of subscriptions. And you're like, oh yeah, I've been paying for that for 3 months and I haven't touched it. So the human part is nice in the sense that it creates that accountability for people, especially if they don't have in-house marketing folks to help out with that.
Exactly.
So it's kind of it's a light-ish weight kind of virtual marketing assistant in a way, where it's you've got the tech, and you've got somebody that's keeping eyes on it when you aren't, mostly. Mm-hmm. So how does Levitate work with other, like how are companies using Levitate with other marketing solutions?
Yeah. So a lot of law firms we work with do traditional advertising, and that's one of the things that appeals to them is like, wow, I'm spending like thousands of dollars on, bus station ads and billboards and commercials and Google. And so, it's a good compliment, because I think what people see is I do spend a lot of money reaching people who don't know me. So when we kind of do a demo and talk to them, they're like, yeah, it makes sense. I have this gold mine of like all the people I know and I've worked with, and I don't really spend any attention on that, but I'm spending thousands of dollars on these other channels. And so that's usually the dynamic that we see is kind of they may be doing a lot of um, paid marketing, and that's fine. Totally continue to do that. And then we help them either mine some of that. We do have some ways where if they're purchasing leads or getting leads that come through a form online, that Levitate can also automatically pull those in and build up a list. Because that's an area I think also people struggle with is maybe you do a good job when the lead first comes in answering the call or whatever, but then
Right.
if you don't hear back from them, like people really struggle a week later or a month later to be like, hey, do you still have any kind of need? And so Levitate can kind of complement there with helping you keep in touch and drip the ones that you already spent time and money with. So that's typically what we see. Outside of the practice management system, we don't have a lot of other integration points that people are, and the leads that I mentioned, we don't have a lot of other integration points that people are really interested in.
Got it. So get the concept of, keeping in touch with people that and you started on this. So are you seeing law firms using the Levitate model with like their intake system? So building that into their sales process when they may have not, it's not necessarily the lawyer, but let's say they have intake specialists that
Yeah.
are managing their leads coming in.
Yeah.
Are law firms using Levitate in that context?
Yeah, I would say somewhat, and we do have a couple kind of plugins and ways to make it easy for folks to add new contacts to Levitate. So there's the parsing, but then also like an Outlook plugin. So if you have somebody in the office who is doing intake or anything like that, they could very easily, or receiving emails very easily, just hit a button and get those people into Levitate.
Got it. Cool. Any other aspects of kind of the product or service that we haven't covered that would be helpful for folks to know about?
No, I think we got a pretty good overview. I mean, we have a couple other things like automations, but I don't want to go too deep and overwhelm everybody. I think we've got a good flavor for it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think we've got it teed up to understand how to use it, because that's always the hardest part, where the idea of keeping in touch with people and managing contacts and emails, but until you get your head around how it actually plays out, it can be challenging for folks.
Yeah.
And before we go, I just want to, we're recording this on February 26th, 2021. And despite popular thoughts, when the year turned, everything didn't, magically go back to normal. We're still work from home. I think we heard a dog a little bit ago, and, and just part of the deal, kids are going to pop up everywhere. So, what's then the pandemic experience from your business perspective? What you've seen different, maybe both, like what you've seen differently from like a customer perspective and or how your team functions differently now.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a crazy year. I've been an entrepreneur, business owner for 20 years now, and there was nothing like 2020 for being a small business owner. I mean, we were pretty successful as a company, luckily, revenue wise and everything. So we actually quadrupled the business in 2020, and just announced that we exceeded 2,000 customers. So on the surface, really great year business wise. And I think part of it was with COVID, people couldn't get together in person for keeping in touch. And so you got to pick up the phone or email or text or do something electronically. And so it kind of resonated. And there's a lot to talk about, a lot to keep in touch about in 2020. But I think that makes it seem like everything was easy because our business grew, but 2020 was an incredibly challenging year for us. We've been working remotely, actually in our company, we have more people who have started since the pandemic than before. So most employees I have
Oh,
never met
interesting.
in person, and managing how do you interview and bring people on,
Right.
get them working and productive, has been a huge challenge. And then also managing the different spikes of COVID. Like sometimes we go to like a 25% capacity in the office, and then COVID spike in November and executive order, and everyone's got to scramble and work from home again. And so it's been really challenging. I'm definitely looking forward to getting through the vaccine and having people be in the office more. I don't think there's any replacement for in-person communication, although I think one thing we have learned as a company is it's not necessary to be in person all the time. I think
Right.
it's important to be in person some of the time. So we've learned a lot and developed some new technology, or you start using some new technology tools that we're going to continue to use once we go back into the office. And that feels like, how do we ever survive without this technology before?
Right.
So there's been a lot of good, I think, that's come from it. But as a CEO, man, it's been a just incredibly difficult year.
Right. So you're going back. So the plan is to get, as much as it makes sense, get people back into the office, because we still see some. I'm sure you've seen this where there's some companies said, nope, remote forever now,
Yeah,
or remote indefinitely, maybe not forever, but it. So the goal is to get as many people back in a way that is comfortable and makes sense. Is that
yeah,
fair?
exactly. I would say probably some people may be in the office all the time who really want to, and actually we have a few people like that now where they can't be at home. They need to be in the office. Um,
Right.
I would say most people will probably be in the office most of the time, but still have the flexibility to work from home 1 or 2 days a week. And then there's probably some people that will be in the office some of the time where mostly they're working from home. But I still think those relationships and that connectivity is important. And I think the
Yeah.
interesting insight I had over the last few months is it's kind of counterintuitive, but during the working hours, it's, I think, fine to be at home, because if I'm sitting on Zoom meetings like this or tapping with my
Right.
keyboard doing email, like I don't need to be, it doesn't matter if I'm really in the office because I'm not talking to anybody anyway. I'm like at my desk doing work. But then the social times, I think, are where it could really be valuable to meet with people from the office. So I can see myself structuring my day where, like, multiple times a week I'm getting lunch with somebody from work, and then maybe a happy hour occasionally after work. And there's where I can really get the relationship building. And but then if I
Right.
have five meetings, then I might actually be more productive being at home than I am at the office.
Right. Yeah, being more intentional with, I think that's happening too, where pre-COVID, people tend to accept or go do more things. Like, I've talked with lots of business owners, especially law firms that represent maybe other businesses, where it's a very basically the underlying, relationships that we've been talking about today with Levitate, where you run around half the day doing meetings and lunches. And I think one of the things that we'll see is like people will be way more intentional, like what you just said. Like, today is good. Like, we'll do happy hours and coffees and lunches, but it's going to be more limited and structured and
Mm-hmm.
more intentional. That way you're not running around and it's not wasting time, but you're losing time when you're bouncing everywhere. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's the thing, is like, yeah, for most people, I think the lack of a commute is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that looks like in the Raleigh area. I guess it probably depends on the individual, but people are saving a lot of that drive time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, that's good. I'm glad things are going well, and I appreciate your time. If folks want to get in contact with you and or Levitate, what's the best way for that to happen?
Yeah, so our website is levitate.ai, like artificial intelligence. And so you can go there, and we have ways to call us and sign up for a trial, or sign up for a demo, which is what I would recommend, because you can really have the conversation, talk about your business. So go to levitate.ai and you can learn more.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Chad. Appreciate it.